Now, the inflationary trend in the money printing seems to only just be getting started. And here to discuss that subject, we have Bryan. Now, we've had Bryan on numerous times. He is a heavily involved mining executive. Two of his big companies right now are Decoupling Silver and Fosterville South Gold. So we're going to be talking about both gold, silver. We're going to be talking about the macroeconomic system and the money printing levers that continue to be getting pulled and what this means for you and your money as well. So make sure you hit the like button on this video to send it out into the YouTube universe so more people see it. Bell notification and subscribe right there down below. Give us a comment that says go gold go right there down below. And give us your predictions on how high inflation will go right there down below. We'll have the website to both Zacatecas Silver and Fosterville in the description right there down below. And it's good to see you, Bryan.
Great to see you, Jake.
So you've been in the industry and been following gold and silver for many years, and I want to ask you, what do you make of when we hear the amount of zeros that major G7 countries are talking about, most specifically the United States? And what do you think the result of all this money printing is going to be? It seems like inflation is basically going to be impossible to stop now.
Well, absolutely, Jake. You really hit the nail on the head. This is a freight train, and the freight train has left the station. And I do get a laugh out of the politicians coming on television, coming into mainstream media every few days, talking about tapering, talking about slowing down this freight train, talking about the state that we're in as if they can push a magic button, inflation stops, the freight train stops, and everything is good, peaceful, and harmonious out there in the economy. And it's just not the case. They cannot stop this. There is a lack of quivers. There are no more quivers in the bow here for the Fed, for the big central bankers. And what I see now is more and more rhetoric out there about increasing amounts of stimulus. It's funny, we in Canada, Jake, have an election going on right now, and daily, each leader of each party is out promising to outspend the promises that his competitor made just the day before. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that this money printing, this inflationary environment stops anytime soon.
Yeah, it almost feels like the end times when every politician's political campaign is now free money. Right now, Gavin Newsom's being recalled as a California governor, and I was listening to him talk the other day about all the free money that's now hitting everyone's bank accounts there. And I just wonder, where does it stop? And what do you think the end game to this whole thing is?
Well, Jake, I think that we're really in a state of craziness out there right now. And the free money is coming at people from every angle. And living in the small town that I grew up in, I know a lot of small business owners and medium-sized business owners. And each one of them, every one of them, to a person tells the same story, that they are out there competing for employees, and their biggest competitor now is government itself. And think about that. These people, the small business owners, the mid-sized business owners, have paid into this system, have seen increasing amounts of taxation, increasing regulation, and now the bodies that they have funded via these government entities are now their most fearsome competitor. I don't know if there is a local store in our country that doesn't have a help wanted sign right now. Yet, most of these businesses are shutting down hours. They're closing up shops at different times during the week when they'd like to be open. And it's because they can't find people. They're competing with the government largesse that's out there. And a lot of this largesse came into businesses under the guise of pandemic relief, but it wasn't targeted at all to the industries that were really being hurt via these various shutdowns. It was widespread. So you have many businesses that were having record years that are still receiving large subsidies now from government. You're seeing individuals that are making more on these government programs than they ever could earn at their jobs previously. So we're going to see real inflationary pressure from a wage perspective also. And these inflation numbers to begin with, Jake, as you know, they're absolute nonsense. If you go outside and try to buy something, you will see within minutes, within an hour of trying to buy anything, that the inflation numbers that the government is putting out just are not rooted in reality. This is a freight train. I don't think they know how to stop it. They talk about stopping it out of one side of their mouth, and out of the other side, the next day are promising larger and larger stimulus programs, and in fact, more and more money printing. So I just don't know what the ultimate end game here is, but I do know in this type of environment, you want to have hard assets and you want exposure, of course, to the only thing that has withstood the test of time and proven to be a real hedge against inflationary environments and the destruction of fiat value, and that's gold and silver.
So let's start with silver. You have a company, Zacatecas Silver. Silver is an interesting one to me because I've always believed, and it really, I feel like my belief has solidified recently as governments have been talking about all these EV mandates and all these types of things, and looking at the math on how much electric vehicle there are right now, how much of the global supply already goes to global mine supply of silver already goes to these things, and then seeing their mandates in my head, I go, has anybody done the math on how much silver they're going to need for any of this type of stuff? And the obvious answer is of course no. And so I want to know, first of all, what is your expectation for silver? Why do you think silver hasn't moved? And what do you think it will take for silver to begin moving?
Sure. No, those are great questions, Jake. And I don't think people have done the math. And silver is a true double threat here to the upside. And the reason that I say that, of course, is number one, for all the reasons I just mentioned, I think you will have dramatically increasing investment demand for silver. People that just simply would rather own gold and silver than own paper currencies that are being printed with reckless abandon around the clock and around the globe. So you have the investment demand. At the same time, you have electrification, and that's another freight train that just won't be stopped. There are mandates all over the place. These mandates are increasing, and there is dramatically more silver used in any industrial application that involves electrification, EVs, of course, included within that, than versus the combustion type models. So we see dramatic investment demand growth for silver, and at the same time, we see dramatic demand for silver, dramatic growth because of electrification and those industrial applications. And this, to me, is just a perfect storm for silver. Now, we picked up the assets in Zacatecas that now form Zacatecas Silver when not many people in the industry were interested in silver assets. And that's been one of the hallmarks of our group. If you go back several years, when we acquired the Kanantu project for K92 mining, that has now become a huge success, moving from true micro cap towards approximately a $2 billion market cap. We purchased that asset when people did not want gold assets. And I'm a former president of K92, and I co-founded the company. So I've been very blessed to see the growth in that situation. At the same time, here's what we've done with Zacatecas Silver. We acquired an asset when most of the industry was simply not interested in silver assets. It's got a great historic resource of silver as a starting point that we want to go in, verify, expand. And it's got a huge commanding land position in one of the world's best places for high grade silver exploration. So we're very excited about the opportunity. And we, once again, I think, timed the market purchasing an asset when nobody wants it. And now we're going to come into such a strong period for silver in general. You can never pick an exact bottom, and I don't know when the bottom will definitely be in here on silver, but I do know that all the fundamentals point to silver going much higher because of constrained supply coupled with big increasing demand due to electrification and also the investment side of the equation.
Can you see a scenario when silver decouples from gold and moves more like a commodity as opposed to a precious metals, given the amount of silver that's needed for these infrastructure and EV talks?
Sure. I think if you look in historic context at the price of gold and the price of silver, just based on how these have behaved historically, there's a lot of room for silver to the upside here in that context of the price relationship over the past hundreds of years. At the same time, I do see some decoupling on the horizon because of the electrification demand, the industrial use that we've just talked about. And I think that silver has all of the investment attributes of gold, but also will benefit over and above that due to these industrial uses. And as anybody in the industry will tell you, there has generally been, over the past decade, a lack of exploration because of the price environment of these commodities. And there will be catch up. There will be a structural issue in the silver market where much more silver is going to be needed to fuel electrification. And without silver, there is no Tesla. Without silver, there are no electric vehicles. Without silver, there is no solar. And that's something that a lot of people don't quite grasp yet. So I do think there can be some decoupling of the gold silver relationship over time, but even a normalization of that historic relationship points to the price of silver going much higher.
Yeah, good point. So, on the subject of gold, now, before we talk a little bit, you've got a gold company, Fosterville. But before we get into gold stocks, I want to get your opinion on the end game for gold. There's been some people that have said, we're in this freight train with this financial system. Inflation's much higher, and there's no way they're going to put the cat back in the bag. When they talk about tapering, they're just saying that they know they can't do it. So they'll run this train and maybe they're going to revalue the price of gold to offset debt to restore confidence in fiat currency if it gets bad enough. Do you think that anything like that can occur? And if not, what role do you think gold plays in this snowballing global financial system?
Sure, Jake. So I think that what's interesting is because we're in North America, a lot of us look at gold, look at silver from a North American centric perspective, and that's natural and it's appropriate. However, we're very much in a global environment in terms of currency through which there are competing groups out there that want different ultimate outcomes. I do think that some of these groups, and if you look at the flows of gold over the past several years, you see big accumulation in places like China, big gold accumulation in places like Russia. I don't think it's an accident that there has been big accumulation there. I also think there have been games with the price of gold to allow that accumulation to take place in a way that benefits the accumulators. i.e., China, Russia, India, etc. This ultimately doesn't bode well because when a resetting, and maybe it's not a complete reset, but when a resetting of the currency regime out there, when there's a reevaluation of what appropriate reserve currencies in the global perspective may be, I think that, as the old saying goes, those with the gold make the rules. And that is scary from a Western perspective, but I think that this is systematically happening. Mainstream media is not covering this. Most Americans, most Canadians would not know at this point in time unless they're tuning in to some of the media sources out there that are more cutting edge and actually looking for the truth. They wouldn't know that there's been this huge accumulation in the East versus the West. What that ultimately means, I believe, is that these Western nations that want their reserve currency, i.e., the US dollar, to be the undisputed reserve currency in the world, are going to be in for a shock. And like I say, and I think it's worth repeating, he who has the gold makes the rules. And unfortunately, if this trend continues of gold flows from west to east, we won't be in the position to make those rules.
Very interesting. So essentially, what you're theorizing is that you believe that part of this paper manipulation of gold has been to benefit the new accumulators of gold. And I wonder what is on the other side of it. Is it that there is an anticipation of a new gathering soon, a new Bretton Woods of these major countries, and then they come to the table and China says, hey, look, we have all this gold and you guys can sell your oil to us, and we'll have our trade with you backed with gold, and that this brings a new power to say China, Russia, Iran, the rest of their group.
I think that there's real potential for that, Jake, or a version of that. At the same time, I also believe that the ultimate outcome here, the exact shape of which is tough to determine ahead of time, but the ultimate outcome will force this silly season of 24/7 money printing and escalation of money supply at rates which the globe has never seen before comes to an end. And it will no longer be acceptable for countries to simply increase that money supply at will and still maintain status as a reserve, as a trusted currency from that global perspective. I do think that what various intelligent market participants have realized is that this money printing can't go on forever. What stops it is a return to some sort of valuation of currency pegged to gold. Gold has been a currency for thousands of years. We all know that gold is a store of wealth, it's a store of value, it's a hedge against uncertainty, but it's also been a currency for thousands of years. It's the only currency that has withstood the test of time, as many other paper currencies have come and gone. Many other so-called reserve currencies have come and gone, but gold has withstood this test. If 2,000, 3,000 years ago, you wanted to buy a beautiful men's suit, you could do so with an ounce of gold. Today, you can buy a beautiful men's suit with an ounce of gold. There's no other currency in the world that you can make that same statement with, because these paper currencies end up obliterating themselves through political desire to print more and more and more and print our way as societies out of trouble. And that never ends well. And that's why I see increasing gold flows from west to east, and there will be an attempt at some sort of reset that again puts the prominence of gold, which is still there, more front and center in people's minds.
Very interesting. Yeah, you would think at a certain point, the people accumulating it, China, Russia, and some of their other allies, there's a point at which they will have a vested interest in finally seeing the price of gold rise. And so that'll be interesting to watch itself play out. Now, tell us a little bit about Fosterville South and what you got going on in the gold world.
Sure. So over a multi-year period, Fosterville South accumulated what we believe is the premier land package in arguably what's the world's most important region for high-grade gold exploration, and that's within this Fosterville area. Our COO and co-founder, Rex Motton, grew up in Victoria, spent his teenage years prospecting around the Victorian Gold Belt. And when Kirkland Lake started to have their huge success at their Fosterville mine, Rex quickly assembled and accumulated all of the best prospective land around that area, and included within the thousands of square kilometers of tenements and tenement applications that we have in place within Fosterville South. We have 600 square kilometers contiguous with and immediately south of Kirkland Lake's Fosterville mine. So over the past year, we've done an incredible amount of groundwork, vectoring in on targets. We've got through an immense amount of historic data as part of that process. We've got drill permits in place, drill contracts signed, and now the program is very drill centric. Just a few weeks ago, we announced a very lengthy intercept of ultra high grade gold, and we're now following up on that. And when I talk about the numbers in that news release, you can refer to this on our website and on CDAR, of course, but there was a 4-meter cut north of 80 grams per ton gold within 11-meter core length, grading 30 grams plus per ton gold. So really exceptional start to drilling at this particular project. We're following up on it now. We've got some great shareholders. We announced that both Eric Sprott and Ross Speedy were early shareholders and investors in the company. So just couldn't be more excited about it. And we think that we're in the right place at the right time. We also have approximately $25 million in cash. So we're really well funded to accelerate the exploration now that we've had this early high grade success.
Fantastic. So what do you think are the most important things or the things you're going to be keeping your eye on in the macroeconomic climate as potential drivers, not only for gold and silver, but just also things you're keeping a watch on as this snowball of a financial system continues?
I think that the thing that I'm paying most attention to are the inflation numbers, and just seeing where that inflation goes and what attempts they may throw at this to curb inflation. Because any scenario that I see the Fed taking, the central bankers around the world taking, just doesn't end well. And of course, we would look at, will there be a rise in interest rates? And we all know that with the consumer debt levels where they are, with the tinderbox that exists within the economy, that could be an extremely dangerous game to play. So I'm looking to see what the central banks, what the Fed attempts to do here as a first move to stop this freight train, and how badly the result ends up from that first move. I think that a rise in interest rates in so many ways would make sense right now, but I also think it could end in disaster for Main Street America and for indebted North American consumers and voters. So I think there'll be real reluctance to take the steps that they have to take to get inflation under control. So I'm really interested to see how long they let this inflationary environment balloon until they actually take a couple of concrete steps. And then I'll be watching to see how bad those results are from those concrete steps that are taken, because we haven't seen anything concrete yet attempting to cool this inflationary environment.
Yeah, they seem to scare everyone and make people a lot of people believe that they're going to taper. Um, I find it very unbelievable personally, as you stated. There's going to be a lot of potential consequences if they do that. Do you think that that's something they're actually considering?
I think that there would likely be a lot of internal discussion there amongst the powers that be, because the political ramification for tapering could be immense. And that's who is ultimately dictating policy here. Nobody's dictating policy for the benefit of long-term economic security. They're dictating economic policy based on an ability to control and maintain power. And those are really two different objectives. And I'm sure there's a tug of war within the central banks, within the Fed, within the government, and the powers that be at the moment, because anybody can see that this inflationary environment is just not sustainable. But I also just can't see the political will being there for anybody that wants to maintain power and control to take the steps that are necessary to rewrite the wrongs here. So I don't think there is the will to make the changes that are necessary to straighten the ship.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. One thing we know for sure, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't privy to it, but the more they continue to print all around the world, obviously we're seeing the gap of the rich and the poor continuing to grow. Then there's a lot of people, rightfully so, disgruntled, and so they're calling for money to come their way. But of course, the unfortunate side effect of this that many people do not realize is in this process, all this is really doing is a little money gets shoveled off and the rest of it continues to buy up the rest of the assets. We're certainly in the middle of a drastic wealth transfer. And I guess that's why gold and silver come into play, right?
Absolutely. And as a business person involved in the mining space for a long time, I'm of course enthusiastic about where gold and silver are headed. However, as a citizen, I'm worried about this growing inequality, and inflation hurts those the most who don't have any hard assets and who are out there having to acquire hard assets. Those of us that own gold equities, silver equities, physical gold and silver, I think there's an ability to sleep well at night. And look, in exploration, there's always risk. And I always tell people that if you're looking at the mining or mining exploration space and think there's no risk involved, you've been misguided. There's always risk. There's commodity risk, there's political risk, exploration risk, etc. There's risk with everything involved in speculation and investing. However, there's huge risk as well in not owning hard assets. Those people out there in society that don't have the ability to own hard assets are going to get hurt the most by inflation and the price of food going up, the price of automobiles going up, the price of real estate going up, etc., the price of just operating as a family going up so astronomically. It hurts those that can least afford to be hurt. And that's the sad thing about what these central bankers and governments are doing around the world under the guise of lifting people up out of poverty. They're actually creating the circumstances that are keeping people there. And that's the sad thing. And that's something that I'm concerned about, because as much as I'm excited about gold and silver, as a citizen, I'm more concerned about the fact that what these governments are doing is hurting the most vulnerable the most.
Yeah, well said, well said. So we want to thank you for coming on today. For anything you think that we missed, give us a comment, question down below. We'll be sure to discuss it on the next episode. Make sure you hit the bell notification, like this video to send it out in the YouTube universe right there down below. Give us your prediction for inflation or comment down below. Go Gold Go. We'll have the link to Zacatecas Silver and to Fosterville South right there down below. Bryan, is there anything I missed or anything you'd like to wrap up with?
No, Jake, I'd just like to thank you for continuing to get people on here talking about what is really going on out there, because these situations just aren't being covered in the mainstream media. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what you said at the end is really important, because we don't realize that while our anger may be in the correct place, the solution is misguided in that all we're doing is exacerbating the same impoverished conditions. We're continuing to inflate this wealth gap and this wealth transfer. And my hope is that, this channel continues to grow and we continue to help more and more people realize what's taking place, because quite frankly, the reason this happens is because we're all saying, hey, please do it. But if enough of us can realize, hey, these monetary policies are actually taking away not only our economic freedom, but our general freedom and sovereignty, then we can start to make some real shifts in society. So if you enjoy this channel, this episode, please make sure you continue to share it. That's how we get the message out. So copy and paste this link, put it on Twitter, Facebook, social media, text it to a friend, and let's continue to help educating people on what happens when we print too much money. And I want to thank you for joining me today, Bryan.
Great. Thanks, Jake.
So hit the like button on this video. We'll have the link right there down below to Bryan's websites, and we'll see you next time.